I'm Jessica. I participated in the El Campanario archaeological project, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So I went to Peru for this. You can see here's Cusco and Lima as like a little reference point, and then I was like 3 hours north of Lima, still on the coast in the town of Formay. It's a very small town, but I actually really liked that, and it was a really fun experience. But not anybody will know what you talk about if you say Formay. So that's where I was. The introduction of like the research goals. So I was a part of the El Campanario site, which was a public platform site associated with a nearby domestic site that had been previously excavated. This was all during the late intermediate period, which was like 1000 to 1400 AD. And the research questions of the excavation were focusing on like socio-political dynamics, specifically looking at the architecture of the site, since they thought it would be sort of like a public plaza, or at least not a residential area. And then also resource production and use through the different artifacts that they were finding, or the different pottery styles and stuff like that. For this field school, there were 2 groups involved. There was like a general archaeology group that I was involved with, and a parallel bioarchaeology group that excavated a cemetery site called Couscous. The people organizing it were very flexible and allowing people to try both sites. So I was able to spend, obviously, the majority of my time with the group I had signed up with, but I was able to spend a couple days at the cemetery site excavating with them, and also spending a couple days doing more bioarchaeological work in the lab, but mostly focusing on the general archaeology and the El Campanario site. So the kind of cultural context, Peru, at least on the coast, is mostly just a series of valleys, and the town of Formay is in the aptly named Formay Valley. And so in this valley, like through time, you don't really need dates except to know that we were in the late intermediate period. But before that, it was under Southern Noche influence, then later it was under the Warring influence. In the time that our site was excavated, or I'm sorry, the time that it was occupied that we were excavating, it was partially Chasma, and then the Chimu were arriving around in this time period. We actually found Chimu vessels in the cemetery site, which was really interesting. There won't be photos here due to publication and stuff. And then in the later horizon, there's Inca influence, but there's no known Inca occupations or structures, but that's possibly just a deficit of a lack of research in the Formay Valley, since it's not one of the most researched valleys along coastal Peru. So our kind of general schedule, Monday through Friday, we worked in the field, so we would wake up, have breakfast at 6:30 a.m. at our local hostel where we were staying. We would take the van to the site and arrive in like 15 to 20 minutes, and then immediately get to work until lunch around noon. Around 1:30, we would stop excavating and start bagging and labeling and organizing all of our stuff. Then we would take the van back to the hostel, complete any lab assignments. We had a rotating schedule of different lab assignments that I'll go over a bit later. And the lab was right across the street from the hostel, which was super convenient. And then around 6:30, we would have dinner at a local restaurant, and then probably immediately fall asleep. On Fridays, we also had reading discussions. We would have weekly reading assignments, mostly just about Peruvian cultural history and other recent research and methods that were being applied in coastal Peru. Every Saturday, we went on field trips. So we went to, this is Corral. We went to Peñamarca, which was recently in the news because of a possible Peruvian queen that they had found her throne room potentially of, and we got to see that site. We didn't see any of the actual wall paintings, but we saw that. We went to Cerro Sechín, and we went to that top one where we're all standing around the excavated site. It was called like the tomb of like the Queen of Formay, and it was a burial site where a very powerful local woman was interred, and then like 30 of her attendants were interred with her. So that was like a really important local site that we were able, it was called the Castle Formay, and it was like the queen. There's not necessarily any state political association, it's just the name that it's kind of been given. And we were able to be given a tour of it by one of the archaeologists who was part of the excavation, which was really cool, and he was helping with our excavation as well. So that's what we did every Saturday, and it was absolutely awesome. And then Sunday we had a free day where you could walk around the town of Formay. There was a beach that you could go to, and a really cute local market. So it was really interesting. We definitely used the free day a lot. It was 5 weeks total. There were 4 weeks of excavation, and then the last week we spent entirely in the lab processing, weighing, and organizing our samples to be sent to a local Peruvian museum. All of the excavated materials end up in storage under the cultural department of Peru. They take control, like no samples leave the country of Peru. For skills, obviously excavation, we did pottery cleaning, we used a total survey for elevations, we did paper plan mapping, and we also cleaned textiles. There's absolutely insane preservation, especially in the cemetery site. The El Campanario site had been looted, so we didn't really find any complete vessels or anything of like super unique notable material, but the cemetery site had complete preservation of the intact burials, which was really interesting, and we got to process a lot of that material. So it was a lot of hands-on cleaning and excavating and mapping and all of that, which was really cool. For results, I can't show you any of the coolest full things, and I will not be showing you any of the burials, but here are some of the pottery pieces that we saw. There was a lot of like molded pottery and incised pieces, and the director had previously found parts of the tools used to create pottery, like pottery molds in the domestic sites, which is really interesting. This is a snapshot of the site. We had a bunch of different floors, and you can see some of the walls here and here. This was only a piece of it. We excavated, I think, 16 squares here, and then 2 additional trenches to kind of get the outline. This was at the top of a hill, and we did trenches going down the hill to see how the architecture changed as you go up. I don't think I put any landscape photos, but there was more going up this like huge hilly mound, and at the very top you could see loose adobe bricks as they circled around, kind of spiraling to the top center. There were also throughout this area just loose bones, animal and human, all around. This was an extensively looted area here and nearby to the cemetery site, so there was just stuff scattered everywhere, which was both overwhelming and really interesting and harrowing all at once, to see just kind of everything on the surface around you. For cost and funding, it was $2,700 in total, which included the project participation, included housing at the hostel. That was a little picture of my room. We each got our own room and bathroom, and as long as you didn't mind that the shower occasionally electrocuted you, I left with no permanent nerve damage and was given 3 meals a day, so I wasn't doing too much complaining. It was 3 meals a day, 6 days a week. Sunday we were on our own, which was usually good because then you could take a break from whatever food the local restaurant was giving you and figure out something for yourself and try the different cuisines. I did get to try guinea pig and alpaca. They were both wonderful. Willing to talk more about that. Did not include photos, they're very graphic. It also included transportation to and from the Lima airport, which was wonderful because the area around the airport is not wonderful, and I've never felt less safe driving in my life. They also don't use seatbelts, except in the city. In our town they didn't, and I knew I was in trouble when our taxi driver got into Lima and immediately buckled his seatbelt, and then I held on for dear life. It also included 2 nights in a hostel in Lima at the beginning and end of the program to allow everybody to fly in and fly out. It was also a around $1,300 flight round trip and about $150 in supplies, which was generously covered by a $1,500 grant from the Archaeology Mobius Fund. And that is it. Any questions? Yeah.
When you say that the site was looted, are these recent lootings that happened maybe in the last 15, 20 years, or the more historical lootings that are actually part of like the history?
Likely a combination. In a lot of the other sites, it was more historical looting where you could see like actual tunnels that people had dug into walls. In our site, it was for sure recent because I had found like plastic trash like 5 feet down, which was disconcerting when you're pulling things out and then you get like a child's toy in plastic, which was like, oh, that's strange. So it was definitely a combination. This was not like a very, I mean, it's rural in the context of a small town, but it is probably walking distance from a bunch of people's houses, and it was definitely walking distance from some of the most poor locations in Horme. So it's understandable that this was probably recent stuff, and there was also a lot of recent construction going on in the area. It was also about 20 feet away from people illegally dumping trash. So we did drive through a makeshift, what was the word? What's the word? Dump? I don't know. Dump to get there. So there was a lot of modern trash involved that probably got intermixed. It was a very interesting site. Any other questions? Beautiful.
Thank you.